I found my wife in our living room with my daughter's fiancé only a few hours before the ceremony. I was about to storm in when movement on the upstairs landing froze me. It was my daughter, Ava. Her face was blank, beyond tears. She looked down at me and whispered, "Dad, I already know. And it's worse than you think." Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Before I dive in, tell me where you're joining from in the comments. Now, let me take you through the day my life and my family collapsed. On the morning of my daughter's wedding, I woke before dawn. 5 a.m. I stared at my drafting table in my home studio, tracing lines on a blueprint that no longer meant anything. I'm an architect, independent, mostly residential work. I design spaces that people call home, places meant to last. Ironically, I never noticed the cracks forming in my own foundation. 27 years married to Leela, 24 raising Ava. I built our lives the same way I designed houses. Carefully, deliberately, thinking good bones would hold forever. But over the past year, something had shifted. Conversations cut short when I entered a room. Her phone screen always tilted away. Late client dinners. Networking weekends. Excuses that came too smoothly from a woman who used to forget where she parked her car. When the door to my studio creaked open, I startled. Ava stood there in pajama bottoms, holding 2 mugs. She handed me one, smiled faintly. "You've been up all night." "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. Architect's curse, overthinking every line. She perched on the edge of my work table, looking small and tired. "Dad, can I ask you something weird?" "Shoot." She hesitated. "Do you think Noah really loves me?" Noah Whitaker. A young, handsome attorney from a well-connected family, charming enough to fill any room. On paper, a perfect match. But I had seen the flickers. The polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes when Ava spoke about her design dreams. The way his attention drifted whenever Leela entered. Still, I played the optimist. Pre-wedding jitters are normal, honey. Ava looked into her coffee. "It's not jitters. Sometimes when he looks at me, it feels like he's seeing someone else entirely." She hesitated, then added, "He and Mom have been spending a lot of time together. She says he's helping her with investments in branding for her design clients. But they whisper, Dad, and he calls her by her first name now." Her words chilled me. "I'm sure it's nothing," I lied. "She likes mentoring people." Ava gave a humorless laugh. "Right, because every bride's mom needs daily mentoring sessions with her future son-in-law." Before I could reply, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Sharp, deliberate heels. Leela appeared, flawless in silk and perfume, radiating her usual effortless control. "Ava, sweetheart, Noah's coming by around 10 to discuss seating arrangements. Marcus, could you check the lighting for the patio? I want everything perfect." Ava's jaw tightened. "Seating arrangements? We finalized that last week." "Oh, just small changes." Leela brushed invisible dust off her blouse. "Judge Whitaker can't sit near your Uncle Reggie. Politics, you know how it is." Her smile lingered a second too long on her reflection in the window. Then she left, leaving the scent of her perfume and a silence thick enough to choke on. Ava stared after her. "You saw that, right?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Something ugly was taking shape beneath the surface of the perfect blueprint we'd spent years drafting. At 9:59 a.m., right on cue, a sleek charcoal Audi rolled into the drive. I watched through the kitchen window as Noah stepped out, straightened his tie, and checked his phone. Leela opened the front door before he even knocked. Her smile wasn't maternal. I slipped out the back door, moving quietly along the hedge toward the bay window of our living room, The room where we'd celebrated every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone. From there, I could see them clearly. Noah handed Leela a folder, some papers, maybe contracts. But they didn't even pretend to look at them. He said something that made her laugh. She placed a hand on his chest. His fingers brushed her hair, then lingered at her waist. When their lips met, the air left my lungs. My knees hit the dirt beside the hydrangeas I'd planted myself. Through the glass, I watched 27 years disintegrate. The room where I'd built our family now framed their betrayal like a photograph. A reflection moved in the glass. Upstairs, behind them, Ava, standing at the railing of the landing, frozen, staring down. Her face pale, her body shaking. The sight of her pain cut deeper than any infidelity ever could. Then suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm. I turned, startled, and found Ava beside me, eyes red, expression hard as stone. She must have slipped outside another door. "Dad, not yet," she whispered fiercely. "Ava, please. I've known for weeks." Her voice trembled but didn't break. I needed proof before I said anything. She pulled out her phone and swiped open a photo gallery. Mom and Noah, hotels, restaurants. I hired someone. "You... what?" "Detective," she said quickly. "Dana helped." "Dana? My sister. 20 years a cop before opening her own private investigation agency. Ava had gone to her?" On the screen, Leela and Noah entering the St. Regis Atlanta. Another leaving 2 hours later, hair mussed, smiles smug. Dozens more. Different days, same pattern. I felt my chest tighten. My God! Ava's eyes flashed. "We don't just stop the wedding, Dad. We end them, both." She looked nothing like my little girl in that moment. She looked like justice. That night, Leela came home humming, acting as if she hadn't shattered our world that morning. She talked about floral deliveries, checked champagne counts, kissed my cheek like habit. I sat at the kitchen island, watching her move through the house I designed, every line, every beam, every detail crafted by my hands, and realized how blind love had made me. When she went to bed, I texted Dana. Half an hour later, Ava and I sat in my studio with the blinds drawn, the glow of the desk lamp cutting through the dark like an interrogation light. Dana arrived with a leather folder thick enough to choke on. "Marcus," she said softly, "you ready?" "As I'll ever be." She spread the evidence across my drafting table. Blueprints of betrayal. "Your wife's been busy. You know about Noah, but there's more." She turned her laptop toward me. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, loan documents. "Leela's been pulling money from your joint retirement for a year. Small amounts, always cash, and these," she pointed to several signatures, "are forged, sloppy but passable." "I said she needed funds for new clients," I murmured numbly. Dana gave a grim smile. "Her clients include Cartier." A receipt gleamed on the screen. $8,500 bracelet, half paid in cash, half from an account linked to Noah's name. Ava inhaled sharply. "They're funding each other's affairs with stolen money?" "That's not all," Dana said, flipping to another document. "Noah's been cooking his firm's expense accounts. Fake vendors, inflated reports, money routed into a shell company under his cousin's name, then into a shared account with your wife." "How much?" I asked numbly. "About 200 grand. My stomach turned. All my careful saving, my planning, my meticulous design for our future, undermined by two people who thought they were cleverer than the man who built their walls. Marcus, Dana continued, I dug deeper. Those weekend retreats Leela used to take when Ava was in middle school? Not for clients. She's been sending monthly payments to a woman named Renee Cole since then. 15 years. Who is she? Former co-worker. Left Leela's firm the same year the payments started. She has a son, 15. No father listed. I stared at my sister. You're saying... I pulled DNA, Dana interrupted gently, handing me an envelope. You wanted certainty. My hands trembled as I opened it. The report was clinical, merciless. Probability of maternity, 99.999%. A photo slipped out. A teenage boy with intelligent eyes that looked exactly like hers. My breath came shallow. She has a son. 15 years. She's been hiding him from me, from Ava. So Mom's been betraying us longer than I've been alive? I closed the file, feeling something inside me crystallize. I'd spent my life drawing perfect lines. Now I wanted to burn the plans and start over. Dana placed a hand on my shoulder. We can do this quietly, she said softly. Divorce, exposure later? No, Ava cut in. Her voice was sharp, steady. Publicly, at the wedding. They wanted an audience for their lie. Let's give them one for the truth. I looked at my daughter, then at my sister, and back at the evidence splayed across my drafting table. The architect in me understood symmetry. What they'd built in secret would collapse in public. Then we'll make it perfect, I said, down to the last detail.
The hours before the wedding felt like standing beneath a roof you know is going to fail, listening for the first crack. I moved through the house I designed with a stranger's hands. I checked string lights and tested dimmers and pretended to care about chair spacing while my mind measured load paths of a different kind. How much truth a structure can bear before it shears. Leela floated through the preparations with the ease of someone convinced the stage belongs to her. She kissed relatives, adjusted table cards, laughed with the planner. She asked me if the lighting would flatter her dress. It'll be perfect, I said, and meant it in a way she couldn't hear. Dana worked like she was drawing up a raid, quiet, precise, invisible. She arrived at dawn in catering black, hair tucked under a cap, a smile that slid right past suspicion. By noon, she'd run HDMI to the main projector and disguised her laptop behind a drape near the AV rack. A single button on a small remote would turn our sweet slideshow into evidence, and our arbor into a courtroom. Ava handled the vendor calls. She was stone and silk by turns, polite on the phone, breathless and bright with bridesmaids, a blade's edge with anyone who said, "It's almost time," like a blessing. When our eyes met across the patio, we exchanged the same small nod, on schedule. At 2, Dana and I sat in my studio for the last brief. She spread the file across my drafting table. Bank statements, forged loan PDFs, the Cartier receipt, the shell company tree linking Noah's fake vendors to Leela's shared account, the arrest warrant prepped by a friend in the economic crimes unit for Noah. Her finger tapped 3 labeled flash drives, one for the firm's partners, one for the officiant if something goes sideways, one for your lawyer, backup of everything, your divorce papers, in my inside pocket, signed, notarized. She held my gaze. Marcus, you're about to bring a house down with people inside it. I know, I said quietly, but the people I care about are already under it. She squeezed my shoulder. Okay, then we do this clean. At 3, the vendors vanished, replaced by guests. Music warmed the air. The lawn glowed. The arch I'd built for a wedding stood like a promise I used to believe in. Noah arrived to applause and handshakes, his smile bright enough to reflect in glass. He hugged Ava with both arms and murmured something that made the bridesmaids sigh. He shook my hand like a man shaking a pillar to test its strength. Leela crossed to him in a drift of chiffon and perfume. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The electricity between them hummed like a transformer. "Perfect day," Leela whispered in my ear as she slipped into the front row. "Thank you for the lighting." "Don't mention it," I said. The string quartet exhaled a final chord. Guests settled. The officiant raised his hands with that well-practiced benevolence. The aisle opened. Ava appeared at the end of the path. She was luminous, clear-eyed, steady, something fierce under the veil. For a second, I saw her at 5 years old, clomping through sawdust in my work boots, announcing she was going to build castles. She reached the arbor, faced the man who would never be her husband, and slipped her hand into his. Her jaw was set like a keystone. The officiant spoke of love and foundations, of trust and roofs built to shelter us. The words slid over the crowd, gentle and warm. I heard them as blueprints. They exchanged vows. Lies answered lies without choking. The rings gleamed. And then the line all architects wait for. Load test. "If anyone here knows of any reason these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." I stood. 300 people inhaled at once. The sound was a canvas snapping taut. Leela's nails bit my sleeve. "Marcus," she hissed, "sit down." I freed my arm, turned to Ava. She gave the smallest nod. Dana, 30 feet away, slid her hand into her jacket and wrapped it around the remote. A single button on a small remote would turn our sweet slideshow into evidence, and our arbor into a courtroom. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I told the officiant, my voice steady, amplified by something older than microphones. "But I have a reason." Noah's smile collapsed and left nothing behind. Judge Whitaker half rose in the second row, rumbling, "Mr. Reyes!" "The truth," I said, and lifted my palm. "Let's load test this marriage before the wind does." Dana pressed the button. The screen behind the arbor bloomed alive. Not the slideshow of a childhood, the still frame of a crime. Leela and Noah in our living room yesterday morning, kissing like fire. The crowd rippled. Gasps, a choked sob, the clatter of a dropped clutch. Leela took one shaky step toward the aisle, then stopped as if a wire had cinched around her waist. "Fake," she snapped, her voice hitching. "Photoshopped. Marcus!" The next image answered her. St. Regis lobby, time-stamped Tuesdays and Thursdays. A valet camera in the garage. Noah's hand on Leela's hip. A corner table at a restaurant I could never have afforded without planning. Her laugh, his gaze, over and over. Habit documented by indifference to being seen. Noise swelled and receded like surf. "This is not only a matter of vows," I said into it, and Dana shifted to a new slide. "It's a matter of numbers. Bank screens, withdrawal patterns, $500, $700, $900, never 1,000, like someone tapping a wall, hunting for the hollow parts. The loans against my retirement with my signature dragged through a printer and taught to mimic my hand. A close-up of the Cartier bracelet on a velvet tray. A close-up of the bracelet on Leela's wrist at Ava's bridal brunch. Then Dana toggled to Noah's ledgers, the shell company under his mother's maiden name, the fake vendor invoices, the flow from retainer per fraud to the joint account linking him to Leela. Noah's partners stood as one organism. Rage moved across their faces like a weather front. Mr. Whitaker, one of them said quietly, "Don't move!" "And rot's roots go deeper than the visible cracks," I said, as Dana clicked again. The DNA report filled the screen, the words blocky and brutal. Probability of maternity, 99.999. Beside it, a photo of a 15-year-old boy with Leela's eyes, trying not to look like he cared. "This is Kai, my wife's son. 15 years she hid him from her family. 15 years she lied to our daughter and asked me to anchor a house with half its beams missing. Silence. Thick. Total. Even the leaves seemed to hold their breath. Noah broke first. He lurched backward, scanned the edges of the crowd like a trapped animal searching for a gap in the fence, and ran. He got 5 steps before 2 officers slipped from the aisle's edge and closed their hands around his arms with professional gentleness. "Noah Whitaker," one said, "you're arrested on suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud." The cuff's soft metal click sounded enormous. Judge Whitaker stared at his protege, at the boy he'd mentored, at the ruin, and looked away. Leela stumbled toward me, palms up, mouth shaping my name like a magic word. "Marcus, we can't fix a crater," I said. I took the envelope from my pocket and placed it in her hands with the care I use for glass samples. "These are my divorce papers. Mine are filed." Her fingers closed around the envelope with the paper's rasp. Somewhere in the middle rows, a woman began to sob. Phones rose, then lowered, embarrassed. The quartet sat frozen, bows slack against strings like thin, sleeping birds. Ava didn't move. She stood with her hands clasped, the pose brides take when they're waiting for joy, and I watched her unclasp them slowly, deliberately, as if setting down something heavy. She turned to the officiant and said perfectly calmly, "We're done here." The officiant swallowed. "Yes, of course." People flowed like a confused river, toward the bar, toward the exits, toward one another, away. The partners from Noah's firm peeled off together, speaking softly to their phones. Leela's friends hovered at a distance, undecided whether to console or condemn. Leela stood alone, the envelope in her hands like a brick she couldn't put down. Dana appeared at my shoulder. "Clean," she murmured. "Clean," I agreed, and felt nothing but the fatigue that comes after demolition, the kind that shakes your muscles because the thing's still falling in your head. Ava reached me, and I reached back. She folded into my arms with the sharp, hot sob of a structure finally allowed to fail where it should. "It's over," she whispered. "It's beginning." We stood under the arch I'd built for a wedding and watched it hold, because wood doesn't lie.
The next 3 hours were measured in statements and sirens and rental trucks backing down the drive to reclaim their chairs. The officers took interviews with minimal fuss. Dana managed the flow like a foreman. Noah rode away in the back of a cruiser, face pale, jaw locked, cuffline bright against tuxedo black. Leela vanished, sometime between the projector powering down and the first car pulling out. I did not look for her. The following morning, the story hit local feeds. By lunch, we were a segment with a graphic. Wedding shock. Groom arrested. Family scandal unfolds. Neighbors texted condolences wrapped in curiosity. Clients emailed to reschedule bids, some never to return. I answered only the messages that asked, "Are you and Ava okay?" And even then, sparingly. At 9 a.m., I walked into my attorney's office with Dana's flash drive and the weight of 27 years on my ribs. By 11:15, the filings were stamped, the terms clear enough to read from across a room. Leela didn't fight. There wasn't much to fight with. Within 2 months, Noah took a plea. The charges turned into time, 2 years in minimum security, plus restitution that would haunt his paychecks for a decade if he ever practiced law again. Disciplinary hearings dragged his name through the same mud he'd slung on ledgers, and this time the mud stuck. Leela's fall was quieter. Her friends became weather, blowing cold, then away. The women who'd once traded fundraisers and florists now traded eye contact for distance. She rented a 2-bedroom on the east side with laminate floors and a view of a parking lot.
I heard this from someone who meant well. 2 weeks after the non-wedding, an envelope arrived with a return address I didn't recognize. Inside, a short letter in careful handwriting. Marcus, I'm sorry for the pain my choices caused you and Ava. Kai knows who his mother is. He learned the rest from the news. He would like to meet you, if you and Ava want that. If not, we understand. Renee. I stared at the paper until the words lost meaning. The boy had Leela's eyes. That was a fact. He also had 15 years of a life lived without me, which was another. I showed Ava the letter over tea. She read it once, then again, then looked up with a steadiness I recognized as our family's truest inheritance. He's my brother, she said. He didn't choose any of this. Let's meet him. We picked a coffee shop halfway between addresses, neutral ground and good muffins. The bell over the door rang, and Renee walked in, weary in the way people get when they've carried a secret uphill for a long time. Behind her, Kai scanned the room like someone preparing a blueprint in his head before he stepped into it. His posture said he'd decided to be brave. His eyes said he wasn't sure it would work. He didn't look at me first. He looked at Ava. She smiled first. Introductions came out like pieces that didn't know where to fit yet. We spoke about school and soccer and the way the coffee shop always burned their almond croissants and how that was somehow part of the charm. No one said Leela's name for a while. When we did, it was careful and did not break the table. Meeting 2 happened the following Saturday at a park near a creek. We skipped stones. Kai admitted he liked old sci-fi novels because they understood that buildings have to make sense, and so do people, even when they don't. I laughed because I had said almost that sentence to a client once, and for a second, the line that divided blood and something else thinned until I could see through it. Weeks stitched themselves together with small rituals, Sunday dinners where Kai and Ava bickered about movies and then texted each other the same memes, Tuesday updates from my attorney about asset transfers and account unwinding, Thursday mornings when I wiped dust from my drafting table and drew a line that would become a wall, that would become a room, that would hold someone else's future. Work dipped, then steadied. Enough clients trusted me to build the homes they'd dreamed of when interest rates were low and the market felt sane. And more found me because word gets around when a man holds fast in a storm without throwing debris. I sold the big house, the one with the bay window that knew too much, and found a smaller place with tall south light and a kitchen that felt like a promise. I carried my drafting table in by myself, set it under the window, and stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of a refrigerator that didn't know my history. Ava went back to school. She said, landscape architecture. She grinned into her mug. Somebody needs to know how to heal ground that's been disturbed. She fell in love with a woman who looked at her like sunrise and asked good questions about soil. They pulled me into nursery trips and debates about native grasses. We argued about sedges as if we were discussing politics, and it felt like family. One evening, almost to the day after the non-wedding, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Leela on the stoop. She looked smaller, as if a talented sculptor had carved away everything performative and left a person trying to stand. "Can I come in?" she asked. I let her. We sat across from each other in a living room with fewer things, all of which I had chosen. She told me she was in therapy. She told me she was sorry. She did not cry, and I did not. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, but hoped for it. "I forgive you," I said, after the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own heart. "Not for you, though I hope it helps you, but for me. Anger is heavy. and I want my hands for work." She nodded, eyes shining but intact. "I understand," she whispered, and stood. At the door, she paused. "Ava?" "She's okay," I said. "She's building things." Leela closed her eyes at that. A flinch, a prayer, a thanks. I couldn't tell, and left. That night, I took a long shower and then walked barefoot through my small house, touching thresholds, corners, the places where decisions become structure. Somewhere along the way, I realized I was no longer moving through a ruin. I was moving through a home. On a Sunday, when the air had that late summer weight that makes everything feel saturated, Kai sat at my table with a model kit spread out in carefully organized piles. He frowned at a piece and then clicked it into place with the satisfaction of a solved problem. "Why do instructions always make the critical step look easy?" he asked. "Because drawings are aspirational," I said. "They show you where everything goes, not how much it will hurt to get there." He smiled sideways. "Is that why you always say good bones about buildings? Like, it can take weight? It can take repair, which is different, but related." He nodded, thoughtful, and bent over his work again. Ava came in from the patio, smelling like potting soil and sunshine. She peered over his shoulder and said, "That seam is crooked." He told her to mind her own seams. They bumped shoulders and laughed, and found separate tasks they could pretend not to share. I stood there in the doorway and watched them be siblings, as if they always had been, and without warning, something unclenched in my chest, and stayed that way. Sometimes I think about the morning behind the hydrangeas, my knees in the dirt, my house a stage for a play I hadn't auditioned for. I wish I could hand that version of me a note with 2 sentences on it. This is demolition. Demolition is not the end. We think we build lives like we build houses: footings, frame, finish. We forget that rot can be removed, joists sistered, spans redistributed so that a room can be safe again. We forget that light can find places it never could when a wall stood in the way. The family I thought I had was a set. The one I have is smaller, quieter, imperfect. It does not creak when the wind picks up. It breathes. If you're still here with me, if any part of this felt like standing in your own half-finished room, drop a 1 in the comments so I know. And if you want to hear how Ava's first park commission turned out, or how Kai handled his first varsity game, or how I learned to cook one decent thing that isn't eggs, I'll be here.
Be kind to yourselves, and if you're rebuilding, remember, good bones don't mean a house never breaks. They mean it's worth the work to make it whole.